Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm going to be hosting the Pizza Premier League this season. The winner of the cup and the league both win a pizza via myself. Please feel free to join in the link down below. Hello everyone, welcome back to Optimize FPL. So we are going to be going through what I think the Premier League table is going to look like next season. Will I get it all right? Will I be shown to see that my ball knowledge is pretty weak? Let's find out. So yeah, we're going to be starting from bottom to top. Let's start with the team that's going to come in last, in my opinion. So this is an easy team to put in last place because of the way they've started preseason and all this other stuff. But even their own manager is saying that they're not at the place they want to be at. It is Bournemouth. Bournemouth in last place, 100% in my opinion. It's going to be like Norwich all over again last season. I'll probably put some money on them to go down because I think that they just don't look good enough. They didn't bring enough talent in. Even Scott Parker is saying that he doesn't think the team is ready for the Premier League. I don't think their team is ready for the Premier League. They have a defensive crisis on their hands. They don't have enough players for their defense. I just like how are they going to stay up if they don't have a defense? That's like one of the main important things that a team needs. So I think that Bournemouth should definitely be worried about their future up in this league. Up next in the table is Fulham. I've got Fulham in 19th place. I think that they're like an all right team. Don't get me wrong. Like Mitrovic is good. Harry Wilson is decent, but like honestly, their team is just not. They just don't feel like a Premier League team. They just don't seem like a team that's going to do very well. Mitrovic does really well in the Championship, comes up to the Premier League, and then stinks the place out. So I don't really know how I feel about Fulham. I don't love them. I think that they will probably be relegated, and that's why I put them in 19th. I just don't see them as a Premier League quality team. After that, it's Brentford. I think second season syndrome is definitely going to hit them hard. I worry about them, to be honest. Without Eriksson, they were on course to get relegated. Let's be honest, they are at least to be in the relegation battle. Next season, they're going to have no Eriksson. They're going to have second season syndrome, where they're going to be a little bit more fatigued. They're not going to have that fight, that willingness they had when they first came up, that dog spirit. So I think that Brentford could, but really, I think they have a really good chance of going down next season. I really worry for them. I think it's likely it's going to happen. In 17th place, and maybe it's just to hedge my bets, it's going to be Nottingham Forest. I think that they are the best team to be coming up. I think they've made some really good transfers, bringing in the likes of Nico Williams and Lingard. I think are two really good players to bring into their team to help them with a little bit more Premier League experience. I know Nico Williams doesn't really have much of that, but Jesse Lingard I think is a great option for them. So I think 17th is very reasonable. Their defense is a little bit weak. Don't get me wrong. They also brought in I think Dean Henderson, or was that Bournemouth? No, I think Dean Henderson went to Forest. So Dean Henderson is a very decent goalkeeper. We saw what he did at Sheffield United. They think they finished ninth that season, so it's very, very reasonable for them, I think, to stay in the Premier League. They got some really good players, or at least some good players. After Forest, I have Leeds. It's just they were so close to being relegated last season. They've lost two of their best players, and Calvin Phillips and Rafinha. Those are really hard players to replace. Don't get me wrong. I think their business in the transfer market has been very, very good. But I just think that Leeds they've lost too much. And last season they did have a lot of injuries, like Bamford was out the entire season. But that could happen again. Bamford could very well get injured again, and if he gets injured, I think Leeds are going to spiral down that table very, very quickly. Honestly, I'm a little bit shocked by myself that I didn't put them in the relegation zone, just because I think they were so terrible last season without Bamford. But losing Rafinha and Calvin Phillips is going to hurt them so much. I just don't see them recovering from it too well. Just enough to stay in the Premier League, but the season afterwards could really, really be bad for them. So after Leeds, it's Southampton. Southampton just are not a team that ever really invoke any confidence in myself whatsoever. They just don't have very much talent. Like they have James Ward-Prowse, who's a great player. Don't get me wrong, great free kick specialist. But other than that, they don't really have too much going forward. They don't have a lot in their defense. It's just they're just a very average Premier League team that I think they will stay up because I feel like every season you think oh, Southampton, who do they really have? Oh, well, they don't have that many great players. They could probably be relegated. But as the season progresses, they get on a win streak of maybe 4 or 5, and that keeps them in the Premier League basically every single season. And then they just coast for the rest of the season, and that's all they really have to do. So Southampton, I think, will survive, but I think it'll be really close. Again, they could be in a relegation fight. I think Southampton, and then the next team I'm going to talk about are the teams that I think all of them could potentially go down. And the next club I'm talking about is Everton. Everton is a team that I think could go down. I think it's super unlikely, though. Their team is they're just a little bit too good. And realistically, they only lost for Charleston, which was one of their best players, if not their best player. But Everton are still a very, very big club. They've got some great players that can definitely turn up and do well enough to survive, like they did last season. I don't know if they should be celebrating the way they were last season. Like, obviously, it's nice to stay in the Premier League, but you're Everton. You're a pretty big club. You should be rooting for higher than this position. Honestly, like, they should probably go out and probably start buying some players. They haven't really done that this off season, so Everton could be in a relegation fight, but I think they should be fine, finishing around like the 14, 15 mark. So in 13th place, I have Wolves. The reason I have Wolves here, they have a great defense. Don't get me wrong, can be a great team, but their attack has always like lacked confidence. They just don't have that that amazing strike force they had when they came into the Premier League. Like they had Jota and Jimenez playing really well, and then Jimenez went off and got like a really bad injury from I think it was David Luiz from his header or maybe Gary Cahill, I can't remember, something like that. But Jimenez has never really been the same after that injury, unfortunately. And their attacking players in Neto and Podence are not players that I really look at and think, wow, they're going to get 15, 20 goals a season, which is what they really need to do to push on and get into a top 10 finish again. So I'm putting Wolves in 13th. I think that's pretty reasonable for them. But they could do much better, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't be surprised if they finish somewhere in like the 10, 11 range like they did last season, but I just think they're gonna fall off a little bit this season. Up next is Aston Villa in 12th place. I'm not a huge fan of Gerrard. I don't think that he didn't really do that well with Aston Villa when he took over last season, and like the players he has at his disposal are very, very good. I just don't. I just think there's better teams in front of them that are more well drilled, and I think the coaching is better. So that's why I put them in 12th place. I just like Villa. They could go on a run and they could maybe get into the European spots, but I just don't see it happening. I just don't see the squad depth. I just don't see them. They just don't have enough for me personally. After Villa is Brighton. I think just Brighton are just a well drilled team. Let's not get it twisted. Graham Potter has got that team playing the exact way he wants to play. He doesn't mess around. And like Brighton, they have such great expected goals, great expected clean sheets. So like those expected data shows that Brighton should be doing a lot better. I think their expected finish last season should have been around like the 8 or 9 mark. But the thing with expected points is that it doesn't really show what actually happens on the field. And Brighton are just not the best finishers in the league, and they make silly mistakes sometimes. So that's why I'm putting Brighton at 11th. They could push on and get into a top 10 finish, but they could also easily fall down the table into somewhere like the 13, 14, 15 range. So I'm putting them somewhere in the middle just because I think that they could either do really well or they could fall off and do really poorly. So I'm trying to hedge my bet with Brighton. Up next is Patrick Vieira's Crystal Palace in at 10th place, just barely edging into the top 10. I think the Palace have a fantastic team. They got some great squad depth in my opinion. Their defense looks so solid under him. Before he came in, Crystal Palace, in my opinion, were a team that probably could easily have gone down. But once he came in, he's really fixed their team up, gotten them playing a really fun style, and I could really see Crystal Palace doing well next season. They've got Zaha playing really well. Their strike force is ridiculous. They got so many different players. They have Ayew, who else? Benteke, Edouard, Eze, Mateta, Olise. They've got so much talent in that forward line, and there's so much depth and quality there that I think that they have a lot of easy rotation. I think they could go far in a cup competition, actually, is my prediction, is that Crystal Palace in a cup competition somewhere, like, I think they could go into like a quarterfinals in like the EFL Cup or into the FA Cup. So that's my prediction for Crystal Palace, finishing 10th and also going deep into a cup. Up next in 9th place is Leicester City. Leicester City are definitely a team that worry me, putting them so high up on this list because last season they really didn't perform very well. They had so many injuries in defense. It was so unfortunate. Fofana going off injured in their preseason, then Castagna and Ricardo not being able to stay fit to save their lives. Jamie Vardy having problems. I feel like Harvey Barnes even had problems last season. I can't really fully remember if he had any problems, but their midfield also had problems from what I remember. Like they just had so many injuries. Ndidi, there's the midfield I was thinking of. They just had so many problems with injuries last season that if all their players can come back fit, I think they have a really, really solid starting 11. They have no European Cup competitions to worry about this season, so they could potentially do better than they did last season. They did finish 8th last season, so I actually am predicting them to finish worse than they did last season. But I just they are a team that worries me. I think they will finish in the top 10, but it's just something that if injuries prevail, their team could easily collapse again and do very poorly. But if they can hold on to their key players and keep them playing well and keep them from injury, Leicester could do fantastic next season. Up next in 8th place is West Ham United. West Ham, they had a fantastic season last season in their European Cup competition. Then they almost made to, I think they made to like the semifinals of the Europa League, which is huge for West Ham. Like that, they don't really do very well in the European competitions. They don't get a chance to play in them very often. So for West Ham, that is a huge accomplishment to get into the semifinals, and to still do as well as they did in the league. I think they finished somewhere around the 7, 8, 9 spots, if I remember correctly. So that is a fantastic finish from them. To be able to do both competitions. So next season they're going to be focusing on only the Premier League. So that's going to be huge for them. I think they could do really well. Honestly, even at 8th place, it's a bit of like not necessarily a rude position for them, but I think they could even do better than that. It's just hard to predict them doing better than one of the top 6 teams or Newcastle, who I'll get to in a minute. But West Ham, I think their starting 11 is really solid. They've just brought in a decent striker in Samaka. Who could really push Antonio to see maybe those two could potentially play up top together, or I'm not really sure what they're going to do, but West Ham I think could do fantastic next season with no European competitions to worry about. I look forward to seeing what they can do. Up next in 7th place is Newcastle United. Now, if somebody told me last season that I would be predicting Newcastle United in 7th place in the Premier League, I'd be laughing in their face, because Newcastle United were atrocious to start the season off. I think that they probably would have been relegated if they were not bought by their Saudi owners. But because they were bought by their Saudi owners, they have done absolutely fantastic. Some great business in the transfer market. Botman in, they brought in Trippier last season. They brought in Dan Burn. They brought in a new left back. They brought in a new goalkeeper in Pope. They brought in Bruno Guimaraes, who has been absolutely amazing for them. They brought in Chris Wood, basically fully permanently relegating Burnley last season. Newcastle United looked fantastic to end the season off. Callum Wilson was doing fantastic. He's probably the only reason that Tottenham finished in the top 4 was Callum Wilson and Bruno Guimaraes. They really tore Arsenal apart. So, and they're always going to be in my heart as heroes, but 7th place I think it would be a fantastic finish for them. I think their Saudi owners would be really happy with that. I think that would also help project them for the season after. So for the 2023-24 season, I can see them finishing in like the 6-7 or the 6-5-4 range, honestly, if they can finish 7th this season, because they'll be able to bring in so much talent. The second Newcastle can show that they're a team that can not only fight for European places, but also a team that is going to pay players a lot of money, players are going to flock to that. Not only can you get the competition aspect and like the pride aspect, but you also get the money as a footballer. It's a win-win situation for anybody going to that team if they finish I'd say in the top half. So Newcastle 7th, I think that'd be a fantastic season for them, and good luck to them. So as we can see, the top 6 teams are the top 6 teams in my predicted teams. So we've got Chelsea left, Man United left, Man City, Liverpool, Tottenham, and Arsenal. Honestly, between 3rd and 6th is a toss-up in my opinion. It could be really any of these teams. But for 6th place, I am going to go for Manchester United. They look much better under Erik ten Hag, don't get me wrong. They've been playing a lot nicer in their preseason games, but I just worry about them this season. Like Manchester United seemed like they were going to do so well last season. They brought in Varane, they brought in Sancho, they brought in Ronaldo. Like those were some huge marquee signings, and they end up finishing 6th last season. Like, and now this season, who have they really brought in that's going to really upgrade their team? They have Martial back from his loan, and anybody else of note that they've brought in? Eriksen maybe, I guess, is a big one, but nothing too amazing. I think Frankie de Jong, if he's brought in, could potentially push them into 5th place. But I just think the teams above them are just so much better that I just don't see Man United doing much this season other than finishing 6th and maybe going far in the Europa League, but nothing too spectacular. Up next is Arsenal in 5th place. Like, their team looks fantastic, don't get me wrong. Gabriel Jesus was a fantastic signing. Looking back on it, I argued with a few of my Arsenal friends that Richarlison's a better player than Jesus, but I think I'm being very quickly shown to be incorrect because he has played absolutely fantastic for Arsenal since he's been in that team. Their forward four look fantastic. Odegaard, Martinelli, Saka, and Jesus, with Nketiah off the bench, and also Emile Smith-Rowe still to be added to that team somewhere. Their front line looks fantastic. They've upgraded their defensive options. They have Saliba coming in now. They have Ben White coming back with Gabriel. They've gotten a new left back in Shinchenko. Like, their team looks really, really good, and they're a young bunch of players. They're only like 25, 24, so the experience might get to them and might not be able to get into the top four. But honestly, this team could push on to the top four. They really should have gotten it last season if they just hadn't crumbled at the end. I think that was really their inexperience and their youth showing, and not their lack of talent. I think that they should be a top four team next season. I just think that their inexperience is going to be something that really hurts them. Speaking of inexperience, let's look at a very experienced team in Chelsea in fourth place. Chelsea's preseason has been absolutely atrocious. Don't get me wrong; they've looked all over the place in defense. Their forward line looks very weak in comparison to some of the teams around them. But they're bringing in some new players. They brought in Koulibaly. I think he's a great signing. They're going to bring in probably another center back, some more support for their team. Chelsea are just a team that they just seem to always finish in the top four. Let's be honest. I feel like I've seen a lot of people predicting Chelsea outside the top four. I think that's so premature to do so. Preseason is important, don't get me wrong, but to predict them outside the top four after Chelsea won the Champions League only 2 seasons ago, I think is very, very, very unlikely. So I think Chelsea top four would be a great bet to have this season, because I think a lot of people are betting against it, and I'm not sure exactly why. So up into the top three, as we can see, Tottenham Hotspur are still there, and they are going to be my third place position holders. I just think that Tottenham, they look great under Conte. They look much better defensively. Their preseason game against Roma does get me a little bit concerned. Maybe that's why I didn't put them in second or even first place. It would definitely be my bias coming in, and not the actual reality of the situation. But I think Tottenham looked fantastic this season. The end of last season, they looked really, really good under Conte. Defensively, they looked so much better, so much more well-equipped for Premier League football. And a strike force of Harry Kane and Son is one of the best strike forces in the league. Bringing Kulusevski in was absolutely fantastic business by Conte. And realistically, the only reason I have Tottenham finishing here is because of Conte. He is the main decision maker in this. He is the it factor for this prediction. So up next, I'm going to be putting the winner and then second place, and I'll be talking about both of them at the same time because Manchester City and Liverpool are very interchangeable in these predicted pools. But I am putting Manchester City up into the top again and Liverpool into second place. Liverpool, they look great. They've brought in some really good players like Darwin Núñez. I know a lot of people were memeing on him. He did really, really well in the Community Shield, and he looked great. But I think losing Mane is really going to hurt them. Diaz, he's very good. Don't get me wrong. I'd love him at Tottenham, but I just don't think he's going to be able to reproduce what Mane had at Liverpool. But we'll have to wait and see what Jurgen Klopp can do with him. Maybe he can get him back. Maybe he can get him up to what Mane was doing. But I think losing Mane was a huge, huge hit to them. So that's why I think they're not going to be able to push on and win the Premier League this season. And then Manchester City up in first. I mean, what else can you say about them? They're just a fantastic team. They do lack a little bit of depth. Don't get me wrong. They're still an amazing team, but they've lost Raheem Sterling. They've lost Zinchenko. They've lost Gabriel Jesus. That's a lot of cover for at least the right wing position that they don't really have anymore. They have brought in Haaland though. So that is a generational talent who's going to do absolutely amazing things at Manchester City. What a signing he's been. 54 million for him is an absolute steal. Great on them to get him in, and I think that this is my final Premier League table. I like it. I think that Manchester City will win the Premier League next season. Liverpool, they do look decent, but they'll be second. Antonio Conte's Spurs will finish above Chelsea, and that'll be the top four. Arsenal, then Manchester United, and Newcastle in the around the Europa League and Conference League spots. West Ham, Leicester, and Crystal Palace just missing out, but still finishing the top half. Brighton, Aston Villa, finishing almost in the top half of the table, having a decent season. Wolves having a bit of a disappointing season by their standards so far since they've been in the Premier League. Everton, Southampton, Leeds, Forest, Brentford, and Fulham will all be in a relegation battle, and Bournemouth are 100% going down. That is my Premier League prediction. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate it. Please feel free to subscribe and like the video. Please leave any comments if you think that any of these positions are crazy. And yeah, please let me know if you enjoyed. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Cheers.